Right, we're live. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So before we get started, so super quickly, so this is sort of an impromptu live that we decided to do. So I'm Cory from Dogley, and I have a very special guest with me today. This is my dad, Howard. And we did a live on Instagram on Friday, but I wanted to do a live here as well, to talk about blue-green algae and what's going on across the country in lakes and ponds and all of that, and how it affects our dogs and what it really means, and if we really need to be as freaked out as the headlines are making us all feel, and all of that. So just a few things to talk about today. But do you, Dad / Howard, want to introduce yourself first and why you know things about algae?
Yes, I'm the dad and the husband, the dad of Cory and the husband of Jane, and I'm co-founder of a company called MTM Environmental Solutions Inc. We have two products that deal with the control of bacteria. One kind of a strange one on the hooves of cows, and the other one called CB, which is called Healthy Hooves. And another one, which is apropos to what we'll talk about today, is called CB-104. And CB-104 is an EPA-approved product for control of algae and bacteria in water. So I have a bit of knowledge about what's going on. So.
Perfect.
Questions that you want me to answer?
Lots of questions, yeah. Okay. So I have questions. So on Instagram, we had asked people to send in their questions. So I have a list of questions, but if anybody's watching that has questions, I'll keep an eye on the comments as well. But the first question is a basic question, just to talk about what is blue-green algae.
Well, the first comment on that is it's not algae at all. It's actually a cyanobacteria. It looks like algae because it's on the top of water, but actually it is not that. It comes from the phylum Bacteria, and it is a small microorganism that's in all water, and it's an organism that thrives on warm water, heavy-duty sunlight, and lots of nutrients. And in the world of ponds and lakes and other things, that mixture of items is there. The bacteria is there. Sunlight is coming down more today than before, and nutrients are coming off of fields, running into ponds and reservoirs and lakes at a rate more than anticipated. So it's all there.
And what does nutrients mean in this?
Nutrients in this case are phosphorus and nitrogen, primarily to help plants grow, obviously, from the fields and farms, or as people take care of their lawns and try to fertilize their lawns, or any golf course, and what the golf courses do to fertilize anything that allows for phosphorus and nitrogen to be applied on the ground, has the ability to run off into a lake or a pond or a reservoir or whatever.
And so what is actually happening? So as you said, so it's not, this isn't all algae that is toxic for our dogs. So it's this certain kind of,
correct,
not even algae, I guess.
Correct. Algae, at the end of the day, there's some 30,000 types of algae, or probably even more than that. So, but what's really happening today, and again, not to be political about it, but the issue is climate change. There is indeed a cycle that the Earth goes through, but it's been helped in the warming cycle by humans. And therefore, as an example, we had the hottest July ever recorded in history and that hot weather allows for the lake water, let's say, or pond water, to warm to the place where the cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae, to grow rapidly, spread across a pond, and that algae has two different types of toxins in it. One is a microcystine toxin, and the other is an antitoxin. The microcystine toxin has impact on the liver should it be ingested by an animal, and especially as a dog. And the antitoxins are very heavily affected the neural system and the respiratory system, and can be extraordinarily dangerous for a dog, as are the microcystines.
So, okay, so you said that for this to grow, it needs warm water.
Yes.
And that means at what temperature?
Water starts at a temperature generally in the start of the season at around, this is a generalized comment for all of the United States, around 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And as that water warms up to 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when all the bloom takes place. It's not that the microorganisms are there and they're doing nothing. They won't bloom until that water warms up enough to allow the blooms to come out. And in the blooms coming out, the toxins come off. And even if the blue-green algae is killed, even there, the toxins remain in the water. So the fact that they're there now, they're unfortunately are there for a very long period of time.
So, okay, I want to come back to that, but they never go away. But my first question is, so we were like seeing a lot of headlines, and I think people were originally thinking that this blue-green algae issue is only something that happens in the South.
No, it happens all over the country. Again, where it happens more probably in the Southeast and generally the South, because that's where the warmer water is. I mean, that's an obvious.
But we're seeing news articles saying lakes in California and
correct,
like upstate New York and
you know, if you go from Lake Okeechobee, which you hear a lot in the headlines about in Florida, all the way to say Lake Monroe in Indiana, or even Lake Michigan. There's a great article in the Detroit Free Press by Dr. Jan Stevenson, who is the professor of algae ecology from Michigan State, talking about the issues of blue-green algae in Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario, all of which are generally cold water lakes, but the lakes are warming up enough that the algae is spreading there, or the bacteria is spreading there. So it's not just one location in the United States or one section of the country. It's all over because of the warm weather.
And it doesn't mean having the lake be like 40 or 50 degrees doesn't mean that it's like 40 or 50 degrees at its like deepest, farthest, or whatever in
Correct.
the middle point.
Correct.
It like, I assume that the shoreline water where it's super shallow will be faster to warm up.
Correct.
So does it matter if it's like a mixture of like it's 40 degrees by the shore, but maybe, you know, out in the middle where it's super deep?
You've got the water at the top. So the water at the top, and yes, you're quite correct. The idea of shoreline water. So if you think about a triangle, shoreline out to where the sunlight can no longer hit the bottom of a lake and come back. That triangle is where the most of algae of all sorts, and especially the blue-green algae, will grow. And as it grows, then it goes, because the surface water is warmer, it'll go across an entire lake. So it's the fact that the surface temperature is rising faster than normal is what's causing the blue-green algae to go across an entire lake. And I don't care what the lower temperature is in the water. So there is issues on all sorts of water surfaces that cause this.
Okay. And so it's not just a southern thing. All sorts of water. Well, still water.
Yeah, it's got to be still water. It's not running water. No, generally because that'll clear it. Not totally, but generally speaking, it'll clear it. This has got to be still water, fresh water. So it's still water, fresh water, warmed up because of the sun with nutrients coming into that still water.
And what if you can't see it? Like it's not super obvious right in front of you, but it's somewhere. Like it's somewhere in, you're at a lake with your dog. It feels like it's such a hard thing to know because it's like you have to know it without even sometimes
Correct.
having it be like in your face.
What you have to do as you approach a lake or a pond is if there's any hint of green in that water or a blue-green look in that water, you just say to yourself, this is not safe for my dog. And my admonition to everybody is a dog should be kept on a leash until that water is looked at by the owner. But if there's any indication that you see of an algae bloom, a green scum on the pond, a green tint in the water, that's what's causing the microcysts to expand and therefore could be very dangerous to the puppies. So it's on the shoulder of the owners to make sure that their dogs are safe and the kind of water they go into is safe.
So now I want to go back to what you said before, because about it never really going away, because I think that it feels like when I've talked to other people about this, it feels like it's something that every summer, which I guess now makes sense because the water is warmer. So this is when we hear about this, and this is when all the headlines start going crazy, that every summer we hear about dogs getting sick, unfortunately some passing away, and all of these articles and lakes of headlines saying like this lake has it and that lake has it and that lake has it. So I guess my first question is this just going to keep happening? Like next summer, is it going to be all the same lakes and it's just going to keep happening?
The answer to your question is yes. What happens during the colder part of the year? The microorganisms are in the water and they stay dormant. So they can even sink to the bottom to a point. But once the water starts to warm, those microorganisms kind of float up, and they bloom, and the bloom produces the toxins. So any lake that is currently infected, we'll call it, will rebloom the next year from, let's say, middle of May, where it starts really to get warmer, through probably the end of September, and that'll vary slightly based on where you are in the United States. So obviously Florida or the southern part of the United States, the bloom will be slightly earlier and will last longer. And the northern part, probably a little bit later and will be a little bit shorter. But it's there, and it's not going to go away. It can be treated, and a product like we have, CB104, can treat the problem. But again, unless you take all the nutrients off the bottom, you never can solve the problem, because the nutrients cause the microorganisms to continue to be healthy and enough to later on in bloom. So what you have to do is control it, but you can't kill it all the way through. It's just too much. Or if a state would want to expend the money to try to control, and there's an enormous amount of money that would have to be spent by any state or local government to try to control this problem.
So basically, if a lake is affected today, it's going to be affected next summer until local governments take action.
Correct. That's correct. And every a couple things I would say. As I said before, most important thing going on is that we have to make sure the current administration maintains a high level of water safety in the Clean Water Act. So if you hear Clean Water Act being in any way disturbed, say no, don't do that, because it's part of our part. Second thing is important, that if you go to a lake and you see green there and you don't see any signs posted or whatever, then your local EPA, state EPA, or in many towns or municipalities, they have local conservation experts. They need to be notified that you've seen growth of algae and what kind of algae is it, and they can come in and investigate and say what it is, so you'll know what it is in that area where you live. But you've got to get the water tested. I mean, one of the things that Dr. Stevenson says is take a sample to your local EPA. Well, you can do that, but that sample has in a jar with a cap on it, that's a life of about maximum 48 hours, more likely 24 hours, just because of lack of oxygen. So it's a very quick thing you'd have to do to a local conservation assessment or an EPA office where you can get that sample tested, so you know what's in that lake.
But that's super frustrating. Like, my opinion.
Yes.
It shouldn't be up to people who are just trying to have a nice day at the lake with their dogs to not harm themselves and not harm their dogs, and to like be there with some sort of vial or something to capture the blue-green algae in like just the right way, to know where to bring it, to know who to talk to have that person do what they need to do with it within a 48-hour time frame. Like, that seems less than ideal. And like
it absolutely is. But it's, at the same time, that's why I make the comment, if the lake has any idea, or as you view a lake, if you see any kind of green in that water, do not let your dog go in that water. And it's not to say that all algae is bad, because it's not. There's just certain things, the cyanobacteria from the blue-green algae, that's bad. But the problem that we all have, all of us, I don't care who we are, all of us have, unless you sit and take the algae out, either in clump form or in string form or by individual pieces, and know what's there, you're not going to know what's there. So that's where the experts come in, where they have to know what to do and have to identify the kind of algae that's there. And that's the only way anybody's going to know, is that lake safe or pond safe for a dog to go in. It's the only way. And it's really up to it's up to us as dog owners to protect the dog from going in, and it's up to local authorities to work to answer the question, is the pond safe? And if it's not safe, to post it, that it's not safe for humans or animals.
And to do something about it.
Right.
I mean, it's step one is to put up a sign, but ultimately, like, if a lake today has blue-green algae and you're saying that if nothing is done, then next summer the same lake is going to have it again, then it's just going to keep happening until somebody does something.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Not good news, but that statement is correct.
Yeah. What I had one question just about what it looks like. So we keep saying that if it looks green or if it has a blue hue to it or whatever, but there are photos circulating in some of these kind of outrageous articles where it looks like, I mean, it looks horrible. Like, you know, you don't want to go in it, your dog, like, it just is an obvious thing, like, that nobody should be in that water. Is it always that obvious of like that? It looks like you could almost walk on it. Like,
you almost can to a certain point. The more of that algae bloom that goes across the entire shoreline and then out into the lake, that bloom is easily seen. Other things that are there is a floating light green algae that, again, it floats. It just on the surface. It's not blooming as much as the cyanobacteria, but it's there. So again, the statement of, if it looks green, don't go in, or don't let your dog go in, because that could be harmful to the dog.
We got one question that I thought was an interesting one. The question is, what in the environment has changed that has become a more prevalent, that this has become a more prevalent issue? For example, herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers. Have we upset the balance of good microorgs?
Well, herbicides and pesticides help control all sorts of insects and other things. So they effectively, I would say to you, those are actually a controller of some sort, a killer of some sort. The nutrients, meaning the phosphorus and the nitrogen that go into the lake, come off of fields, and they are supportive of life. So therefore, they cause the algae, regular algae, blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, to grow. The other ones do not.
Supportive of life sounds like a good thing.
I'm sorry?
Supportive of life makes it sound
like
a good thing.
Well,
I guess it depends on who you're.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. That's right. If you want to control the amount of phosphorus and nitrogen that goes into a lake or a pond, you build a barrier. Interesting enough, you build a barrier of plants that will absorb that before it gets to the lake. And they're doing it in the Chesapeake Bay now, where they're phosphorus and nitrogen eating plants are taking it all in, or as much as they can, and therefore very little is getting into the bay itself. And that's what you'd have to do. Again, it's time, money, effort, all that would go in to try to solve the problem. Yes, CB 104 could be very helpful in controlling that, but again, you have to understand what's going on upstream. It's not just right there at that particular pond. It's what's causing that flow of the nutrients to come into that pond.
Another question we got, that we actually got several times, is are these scares and warnings and all of these, I mean, some of the headlines of articles are like truly outrageous and very clickbaity, but a lot of people, I'm nervous, and we don't even take really Bosley to lakes and ponds. But, we know a lot of people that their dogs are huge water dogs and they love it, and it's a huge part of their lives. So should people be like, are the scare tactics, or are all the warnings and sort of the fear that's out there, is it a valid feeling for what's going on?
Unfortunately, it is. Unfortunately, it's valid, and it's again across most of the United States, and most people don't recognize that that's the issue. It's across the United States. There was a interesting video put out by Dr. Brett Levesky, I believe his name is, from Verg in Brooklyn, who is a veterinary organization. It talks about all the kinds of things that can happen as your dog goes into a pond that has the microorganisms in them, the microcyst or microcystines, or the antitoxins in them. And he gives a very good description of what goes on with the dog that's there. So yes, it's all over the United States. Yes, it's caused by warm water or warmer weather than we're ever used to. And no, there's no real solving unless a lot of money is put forward to do it.
Okay. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
So the first one is, can we just recap quickly for everybody who's coming and going, if anybody missed the beginning, can we give like super quick breakdown of what, like, warm water, water that's over 40 degrees, over 50 degrees?
50 degrees. It starts there. It will really will be at when it reaches that 65, 70, 75 degrees. That's where it's really important.
Okay.
But it starts as soon as the thaw happens in the northern part. Okay. So as soon as that thaw happens and that water gets to a temperature of between 40 and 50 degrees, the microorganisms will start to come up off the bottom and will start to grow. So the hotter the water, surface water now, not below, surface temperature of that water is, the more of those microorganisms will grow.
Okay, so 40 or 50 degrees
Plus.
to be aware of.
Yep.
What was any type of like runoff or anything coming in to
Yeah,
be?
Yeah, the biggest issue is how much phosphorus and nitrogen are coming in, either from fields or places where fertilizer has been put down, and for whatever reason, either directly into that pond or through some stream that empties into that pond or reservoir. So it's not just the corner of the reservoir where stuff comes in. It's what's feeding that reservoir, what's feeding that pond, what's feeding that lake, where's it coming from, and how much upstream problems exist that allow that nutrient to come into that lake or pond.
Okay, so it's temperature, it's what's coming into the lake or pond.
Right.
And I guess temperature is sort of connected with that. It's not just southern. It can be anywhere, wherever there's potential of water being
correct
above 40 or 50 degrees.
And just I'll give a totally separate example. There's concern right now in Alaska on the salmons and spawning season in Alaska, where they reach what they call a temperature barrier in the water, where the water is warmer than usual there, and it is now, and the salmon go into a heat stress, so they can't spawn. Same issue here is warm water. So back down in the lower 48s, we're talking about warmer water causing the cyanobacteria to bloom and therefore cause a problem. So it's totally all sorts of things going on because of the warmer water.
So the water's warming is causing an issue for a lot of different things. And
if you equate that to global warming, the answer is it's all over the world. It's not just obviously here. Right. It's all over the world. And it's global warming, and it's happening. And until we figure out how to solve that, I'm afraid this is going to continue.
Right. Okay, so temperature, things coming into the lake or pond.
Right.
And the last thing that I think is important to recap is that it never goes away.
Nope, does not go away unless you do some remediation work that's extensive. So again, go back to my admonition for a second. My admonition is, as you walk your dog near a lake or a pond, keep that dog on a leash. If you see green in that water, don't let the dog in the water any way, shape, or form. Should that dog go in that water?
Or you?
Yeah, or a human. Correct. Yeah. That's absolutely correct, because it can cause all sorts of things. And then lastly, if there is no markings anywhere that says warning markings that say that this pond is not good, then get to your local EPA or get to your local conservation expert and say, what's happening in XYZ pond, so we know whether we can take our puppies there for a good time.
Okay, and that feeds nicely into my last question for you.
I'm glad I'm doing well.
You're doing very well. Really great. What can we do? Because I don't know if you've met me before, but myself, and I think a lot of our people, we are action-oriented people. And just saying we can't take our dog to the lake anymore because the water is getting warmer and our local governments can't afford to fix it. What help me? What can we? There has to be something that we can, even on the smallest scale of calling our local government and saying, this is super important to me. I want my dog to be able to have a fun time in our amazing town where we live, at our great lakes and ponds and whatever. Is that it?
Yeah, essentially. Every town, regardless of size, has line item budgets that they all have to adhere to. Most towns would not have an algae remediation line item. So what you have to do in your individual town, if the problem exists in the lakes and ponds around the town, is you must get that town government to put money, allocate money into a line item where this type of work can be done for remediation. And again, it's what everybody has to understand. If it's not a one-time, one-day effort, in most cases, during the course of a season, every 10 to 14 days, you must do something in that pond because the algae will come back in that time frame. In some cases, it might be as much as 20 days, but you figure 10 to 20 days, that algae will rebloom. So you must do something to re-inject whatever you're trying to do to control the algae in that time frame. So over a course of May to September, if you think about that, you've got 5 or 6 times you have to do something to try to do the remediation work. And that's expensive. And that's what most towns can't afford right now, is that kind of expense. And the federal government, I'm sorry, is not there with you. So it's going to be local municipalities and local efforts to do it.
And they will only do it if they know it's important to
That's
us.
correct. You have to let everybody know that it's important.
Great. Well, thanks, Dad.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Hope I was helpful.
Very helpful. Thank
hopeful.
you for coming on your second live.
There you go.
Very exciting. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions, this is my dad, so I can always ask him more. Obviously, he's super smart when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, any questions, definitely reach out. And yeah, have a great rest of your Monday night. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.